Welcome everybody. My name is Shauna Duncan. You're here with us at the UBC Learning Circle today. It's so good for you to join us in video conference land and webinar land. We're honored to be working here and joining Ernie on the unceded occupied traditional territory of the Musqueam Nation. Our session today is Indigenous lands on co-occurring disorders. And before we get started, just want to state that there is sensitive subject material today, and as there is always with our learning circles, and some things might upset people or be triggering, so please make sure that you have a support system in advance prepared for yourself, which could mean just trusted family, mentor, friend, an elder, a counselor, and perhaps a number that you could access for a crisis. But yes, this is Ernie Cardinal, and he's with us today. I'm so grateful to have him here. And Ernie, would you mind introducing yourself to everybody?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I can see this great audience over there at Adams Lake. Thank you for joining us. Great. Yes, my name is Ernie Cardinal. I've been a frontline worker here in the lower mainland now for, 20 years. You know, but I tell you, it feels like I'm just starting, right? Every day is new.
Yeah.
Every day I get to learn something new. A Douglas College student still, because I believe that education should be a lifelong journey. And I'm also a graduate of the Co-occurring Disorders program. Now, I hope you can see my smiling face there. It actually was a poster campaign that was across every bus and SkyTrain just a little over 2 years ago. And they asked me because, well, you know, one, I am a proud to be Cree. I am a co-occurrers grad, and I do believe in helping people regain their dignity. Now, the nice thing about this poster was, I didn't know it, because at the time, Shauna, I thought that this was going to just be for our little pamphlets and our little brochures, right? That's what I was told. So I'm like, yeah, sure, Bob. Sign me up. Actually, I laughed when thinking me a model. Right? But I thought, sure, let's do it. So about 6 months go by, and one day I'm at a street corner, and this bus goes by, and lo and behold, what do I see? Big old picture of me going by. That's when I start getting calls from all my friends saying, Ernie, there's like, every SkyTrain has this big poster of you on the SkyTrain. So I thought, wow, you know, just like they all say, you know, that's felt like my little 15 minutes of fame. I thought I was going to be famous. So it was summertime. I had nothing to do, so I thought, you know what? I'm going to kind of take in some of that fame. So I looked at my poster, and I went out, got the same jacket, same shirt, same pants, same everything, right? Dressed up, the same thing, and then I caught the SkyTrain. And the first thing I did was I went right next to the big poster and I sat here next to it. Just kind of like this, right? And I rode it right from King George all the way to Waterfront and back. And you know what? Not one person noticed me. Oh man, that was a real hit to my ego. Oh geez. You know, like you would think one person, right? You know, a couple people were checking me out, but you know, I'm good looking, so of course, you know, that happens all the time. But the thing is, though, is that kind of hit me too, because when I was a student in the program, and people were asking me, what are you doing at Douglas? And I said, well, I'm in the co-occurring disorders program. And they're like, what? Right? And then I'd have to explain what co-occurring disorders is. So, well, you know, just like this poster, right? You know, like it's out there, it's everywhere, it's all around us, but yet people really don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So, good question.
Yes.
And co-occurring disorders is when you have a mental health illness at the exact same time of a substance abuse addiction. Now, it has to be at the time where it is both affecting you at the same time, right? So a mental health illness could be a diagnosis, but the substance abuse addiction has to be something that is actually affecting your daily life, right? And it's happening at the same time, so that when you go for treatment, this is where co-occurring disorders comes in. The reason why I say that is because there are different treatment types out there. And the traditional medical way of dealing with issues is to basically have a sequential way of dealing with the disorders. For instance, if somebody comes in, you deal with their mental health issues. You get them on their mental health medication, and then after they're set up in a, like a nice program, then you send them off to a detox, or vice versa. The only thing about this program, or this treatment type, is a lot of people fall in between the cracks. And that is a big issue. Because what was happening was a lot of people that were actually using, because let's face it, when we're talking addiction, we're not talking about, somebody who wants to smoke pot every once in a while. We're talking about people that need this, self-medication. So they have a mental health issue, so they go to the hospital. But because they are actively using, the hospital would deny them services. So they would go to a detox center or maybe a shelter to get some help with their addictions issue. But during intake, one of the very first things that are asked is, do you have any mental health issues, or is there any mental health medication that you are on? And if you disclose that you do, because most shelters and a lot of treatment centers don't have the mental health workers, they are denied admission as well. So they would fall in between the cracks. So that was the big problem with sequential treatment types. A lot of people were starting to get affected, so we tried something else, which is parallel. That seems perfect, excellent, we got it, right? Unfortunately though, what was happening with a lot of parallel systems is they're like two separate silos, right?
Yeah.
What's happening is a person will go see their mental health practitioner and get a bunch of advice. They would get out, hop a bus, go across town, and then go see their 12-step coach or their addictions counselor, who would give them other information. And of course that would not work, right?
Not working together.
It was not working as well. So although the parallel treatment type sounds on paper, it sounds like the perfect thing, it just wasn't working. So in came integrated.
Okay.
It's also called the wraparound.
Yes.
And the thing about integrated is, as you can see from this pretty little diagram, it of course represents maybe an Aboriginal holistic look at treatment, which means that we come together as a community. The individual now has supports that talk to each other, supports that are going to work together for the needs of the client. Yeah, so that is, in a nutshell, what co-occurring is and what the basic treatment types are.
Before we get started, is there any questions from anybody or comments from Adams Lake or from Webinar Land?
Hi, everybody.
If you want to comment at any time, just undo your mic, unclick your mic, and go ahead and ask.
And just have a sip of your tea and just kick back, because we're here. We're live.
Okay, any big questions here? Okay, I guess not. I guess we'll just keep going.
Yeah, basically what I was trying to get at is co-occurring disorders is best and most effective when both disorders need to be treated together to have effective change, right? So the whole purpose of the whole co-occurring disorders is to work not just in tandem, but to actually work in a real kind of like medicine wheel approach. Now, when we talk about the medicine wheel, I gotta ask a question. Or do you want to ask a question for me, Shauna?
Yes, I would like to ask a question. What population is most affected by co-occurring disorders?
Now, should we send that out to Webland, see if a couple people can take it in there?
Anybody at Adams Lake? Or Webinar Land?
I'm talking to you there. Come on, Fizz.
So
I know you're out there.
We're hearing youth, all, Aboriginal, our youth again, so Aboriginal youth, all.
Well, I think we have a lot of smart people out there. Because you are right. Aboriginal people are the #1 people affected. And when you really look at Aboriginal people, when you look at youth, that is a big component of people that are being affected with co-occurring disorders. Now, we also have to really specify though, youth is going to be in this term 16 to 24.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, well, I should say, statistically, a lot of mental health issues start to show at the age of 18 and 19. So that's usually when psychosis comes up and, you know, a lot of the other mental health issues that people are really aware of. But that brings me to a really important question. And that's another thing that co-occurring disorders really works towards, is to kind of debulk a lot of myths, deconstruct a lot of you know, stereotypes of what substance abuse is and what mental health is. For instance, let's send out another question out there, which is, what is the #1 mental health illness or diagnosis in Canada? Or actually, we can even go so far as say the world.
#1.
The #1 mental
We're
health.
getting depression.
That's just making me sad.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, holy smokes.
Anxiety disorder, yeah.
Mhm. Any more?
Okay.
Because
Any
unfortunately, no. Depression, no. Anxiety, no.
No.
They are really out there, but no. Do you have any idea?
Co-occurring disorder?
No. The #1 mental health illness is epilepsy.
What?
Now, I love the way you said that, and I love the way you said that, because this is what I mean by changing our perception or our paradigm of thought, to give it a paradigm shift, is whenever we say epilepsy, people are like, well, that's not mental health. Mental health is like crazy people, right? No. When you look at the brain, which epilepsy affects the brain, hence mental health, right? So epilepsy is the most diagnosed mental illness out there. But we have to start looking at mental health as something that affects everyone. And it's not this big scary thing. It's not psycho. We're not talking Norman Bates and Freddie, well, not Mike Myers and all those, let's say crazy people, manic depression, whole bit. We have to start realizing that mental health is you and me. It's everyone that is walking down the street. And chances are, people or yourself will be affected at least once or twice in your life with a mental health illness. Right?
So would you say, okay, mental illness, would we say just the brain itself, because the brain is an organ in the body like the other organs,
Yes.
is having health issues?
Yes.
The brain itself, so it could be a variety of
It
things.
could be a variety of things,
Okay.
exactly, Shauna. Plus, we also have to look at the brain as a, well, I should say ourselves, as people that, oh geez, how can I put this? That is, geez, I almost lost my train of thought, and here we are on live. Let me take a drink here.
So somebody's asking, is epilepsy more common than depression?
Yes, it is. It is the most common mental health illness. And when we look at people with epilepsy, it's more like, oh, okay, well, I totally understand. So back to the thought that I was forgetting, which goes along with this. Thank you for this very nice quote. Who sent that out?
Where are we now? Right so fast.
Oh, well, keep
yes.
those comments coming in.
Christina. she
Oh,
was
thank
saying-
you, Christina.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect example because, for instance, if somebody had a broken arm, right, and came in with the cast and said, I got a broken arm, right away we'd go, oh, geez, can I sign your cast? But if I came up and said, I got depression, our attitude is going to be different. You know, like, oh, geez, oh, I'm so sorry, right? You know, there's this kind of a pity feel, or it could be like, oh, get over it. You know, just smile, you'll be happy, breathe, right? But the point is, though, is it's not that easy to do, right? So a lot of times the people that feel that they're not being understood, and sometimes they go to a practitioner that just doesn't seem to really understand what's going on, what do? You know, they're now sad, they feel alienated, they don't have the right medication, so they want to feel good. So this is kind of the one chicken and the egg scenario I was talking about earlier. They start self-medicating. They are going to, you know, find their own ways, you know, through alcohol, drugs, street drugs, and of course it's going to escalate, you know, from you know, I don't want to, you know, say gateway drugs because, you know, drugs are drugs, but it's going to happen to the point where there's going to be a dependency right away because you want to maintain that dopamine level of feeling well. So what happens, of course, is after a short period of time you become addicted. And then after a long period of time, what happens is your addiction overcomes your mental health. And then what happens, that's when we start going to the hospitals. That's when psychotic episodes can happen. That's when your physical health starts failing as well. So when we think about co-occurring disorders, we have to think about everyone because we're all included in this, right? Now, any questions so far?
People are still very shocked at epilepsy.
That is true. Oh, yes, exactly. I just want to give a shout out to Bob Shabib for that, who was the one who enlightened me. And the first time I heard it, I did the same thing too. No way, really?
Is that maybe who he is that you're referring to?
Oh, yes, he's my mentor and one of the most amazing counselors you can ever meet. Unfortunately, he just retired. Oh, he deserved it though. What he's done for the community is just amazing. But he's still alive in my work. I quote him in every essay I write, and he is a person you should read. He has a textbook called Choices, and if you want a good read, pick it up. It's on Amazon. There you go, Bob.
Okay, great.
Yes. Now, should we go on?
Yes, definitely.
All right. If I'm giving out too much information, I do hope that you say, hey, Ernie, slow down.
What's Bob's last name?
Shabib.
Shabib.
Shebib. Bob Shabib. And if you're out there, Bob, hey, give us a little shout out. All right.
Let's keep going then.
Yes. Okay. So, mental health disorders and substance abuse. Now, when we look at the population that is being affected by that, we have to look at why are just these people getting affected, and who are these people, right? So we've looked at the social determinants of health as the main population, the Aboriginal people, right? Because, you know, these are people who are, they grow up, they work, and they live in a system that really is lacking with resources, job opportunities, lack of education, you know, no disrespect to a lot of reservations out there. I'm from Second Creek Reserve, and I love my reservation. That's a great place. But, you know, the whole concept of reservations is basically an oppressive feeling where there isn't a lot of work. There's not a lot to do. So, of course, a lot of mental health, substance abuse issues happen there. So, we're looking at kind of like a cross-board of disadvantage, right? So when you look at a population that is disadvantaged, what comes to mind?
Well, they're obviously struggling, and sometimes
Yes, exactly.
things can snowball, but yeah.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people always ask, if I am growing up in a poor neighborhood, why don't I just work every day and just get up and just do what I do and I'll succeed, right? Just kind of like in those Disney movies, right? Hollywood, and yeah, in a perfect world, and believe me, it does happen. There are a lot of people out there, but in the real world, though, for every success, there's so many people that have great intentions. They come from a good family, they're loved, but yet something happens, right? So, why don't we do a little scene? Do you want to do a scene?
Definitely.
Okay. Now, here's a clear picture of what I was talking about what SDHs are. Okay? Now, here's a clear picture. This deceptively simple story speaks to the complex sets of factors or conditions that determine the levels of health of Aboriginal people. Okay?
So I'm going to start off by, why is Jason in the hospital?
Because he has a bad infection on his leg.
But why does he have an infection?
Because he has a cut on his leg and it got infected.
But why does he have an infection?
Because he was playing in a junkyard next to his apartment building and there was some sharp, jagged steel there and he fell on it.
But why was he playing in the junkyard?
Well, because his neighborhood is kind of run down, a lot of kids play there, and there's no one to supervise them.
But why does he live in that neighborhood?
Because his parents can't afford a nicer place to live.
But why can't his parents afford a nicer place to live?
Because his dad is unemployed, his mom is sick.
But why is his dad unemployed?
Because he doesn't have much education and he can't find a job.
But why, but why, but why?
Exactly. So I hope that kind of helps out, with looking at kind of the causes of the co-occurring disorders. Now, of course, these are causes and effects, Shauna.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually not the root causes, right? Now, the causes and effects, of course, are, and now, of course, this is right from Health Canada. So we're looking at, no money, no real social support, education and literacy. Of course, we all know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to school, your life will be better. There's no doubt about that. No matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, just get to the classroom, right? Learn something. Keep your brain active. Keep it strong, right? It's like going on a treadmill. Or parking here. I have to park on the 5th floor. No elevator. Of course there's all of these great, well, not great, but you know what I mean, very important points. And it all comes down to the very bottom one. What do you think of that bottom one?
So how does culture fit in?
Well, culture is really important because I'm not saying that, being in a culture makes you poor, right? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is a culture can actually, being a part of a culture can affect you. Here's another question. What are some of the root causes of co-occurring disorders?
Yeah, why don't we ask people in webinar and video conference land? What do you think? What are some of the root causes of co-occurring disorders? We got trauma, childhood trauma.
I like where this group is going.
Colonialism.
Yes. Damn you, Columbus.
Genetic.
Poverty.
Poverty. Cycles of violence. Habits learned from parents. Colonial occupation.
I like that, how they took colonialism and really grew it out.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hopelessness.
Awesome.
You guys are doing awesome.
Everyone is 100% correct. Absolutely.
Adams Lake, would you like to unmute and give us some input? You're being so shy.
You guys look awesome out there.
Would anybody like to offer any comments?
I just want to say thank you for joining us. Though.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important, and
Oh,
yeah.
we've got residential school, 60 scoop.
Holy
Again,
smokes.
residential school, 60 scoop. Misdiagnosis, ignorance to issues, drug addictions for self-medicating, diet,
Wow,
lots.
we've got some really good people
Yeah.
here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, exactly. Now, what I am going to propose there is that every one of those are totally right. Now, not only that,
Racism,
we're going to put all of those roots, grab them all like little balls, throwing them into a funnel, and that really comes down to the roots of what it is, right? We're looking at school dropout, poverty, foster care, and colonialism, and every one of those answers that you guys sent in. We're going to throw them into our funnel, and that funnel is going to pop out intergenerational trauma, right? And the intergenerational trauma really is the number one root reason that our culture is being affected. Now, I'm going to be talking about this man at length, so here's just a little heads up. Reverend Dr. Martin Brokenleg. He's a great man, right? And I was able to see his last seminar at Douglas College, and he talked about intergenerational trauma. And his analogy that he used kind of stayed with me, so I'm going to share it. And what he talked about was how if our grandparents suffered something horrific like cultural genocide from the residential school experience, and they self-medicate, they end up getting a mental health issue, a substance abuse issue, and they just maintain, right? Like a lot of our ancestors have done, like the strength they had, with the hell they went through, they were able to at least maintain. They have children, our parents. And fortunately, that intergenerational trauma is inside them. So it's kind of like a hard candy shell, right? Kind of like an M&M. And it's like a barrier around us. Now the thing is if those parents don't deal with those issues, then the third generation comes out, us. And if we don't deal with those issues, that shell, that thin little candy shell, now becomes thicker and thicker and thicker to the point where it becomes an almost unbreakable barrier. So that's the whole point of intergenerational trauma, is the point that it's not just an individual, it's not just a family, it's not just a community now, it's a cultural thing that we have to deal with. Thank God we have Truth and Reconciliation going through. We have, hopefully, cross our fingers here, a government that is going to back up those recommendations. And great front runners like Wab Canoe and Justice Sinclair that are bringing it forefront to the people so that we do not forget.
There's some more comments from webinar. How many generations to fix this?
That's a good question. Now, a lot of people say, there's one school of thought that actually says that if 7 generations are affected, it takes 7 generations to heal, right? And that could be a while, right? But I've also had a lot of discussions in class where they say that whenever there's a cultural genocide, if it takes 7 generations, it should only take 3 to 4 generations, half the time, for actual healing to happen. Now, of course, that is if the settings, the environment is in a good, healthy, kind of like situation.
So does that mean without colonial rule, or what are you referring to?
Well, yes, exactly. I'm talking about acknowledgement, right?
Okay.
Now, we're not talking about political apology. You know, it's easy for a politician that was never even born to say, hey, I'm sorry, right? Our government's sorry, right? It's easy to say that, but we're talking about saying sorry and actually following up with the proper health and programming and mental health and substance abuse funded programs. Now, luckily, Canada is starting to acknowledge this. Just yesterday, I read online that Alberta has decided to open up the whole concept of co-occurring disorders, where they're going to be opening up beds in Red Deer, Alberta, my old hometown, going to open up different treatment centers for youth, because a lot of people don't think that co-occurring disorders is a youth-focused issue, which it is. As we talked about earlier, mental health does show itself at 18 and 19, and if you get them at the onset, healing can happen, right?
So I guess one question is, is there a way to support or minimize these youth that are coming up, and all of a sudden it starts to bear its head around, like you said, around 18, 19. Is there anything preventative we can do as communities?
There are quite a bit. A lot of people think that is epigenetics, and I'm not a doctor, so I won't talk too much about epigenetics, but we have to look at that whole concept, which is environment, right? Now, a lot of people say, doesn't the individual affect the environment, or does the environment affect the individual? So, we can have a whole webinar just on that alone. But I do have to say that when we look at our environment, if we can look at it in an ecological approach, meaning that it's not just one person that's affected, but everyone, well, then we can start having a more healthier view. Let's face it. Do you remember going to a restaurant or a nightclub or even a theater 20 years ago? People were allowed to smoke. Actually, weren't they allowed to smoke in campuses and hospitals? Do you remember when pharmacies used to sell tobacco? It takes a while, and that's the whole thing about co-occurring disorders. Is it's a very patient process. And I know what you're saying, right? Well, how about a quick fix, Ernie? That's kind of why we logged on. No. Unfortunately, the thing about co-occurring disorders is this is when the community has to learn to be patient. Just like cultural genocide has affected us. It happened over 7 generations, right? So we got to start looking at co-occurring disorders as a direct result of that. So we need patience as well, meaning that when people come into the door that are actually in a hardcore substance usage and maybe having a psychosis, well, we just can't grab them, force them into treatment. We can't do that. As much as we love these people, because let's face it, it's probably your mother, it could be your brother, it could be your son, your daughter. We just want to grab them, right? Get them out. But we can't do that. We can't make them change for us. We have to let them change. So we have to start having programs and groups out there so that, they'll come in and maybe just, come in because there's free cookies and maybe, a cup of coffee, right? So they can come in and just see what's happening, right? So they kind of walk around, maybe listen a little bit, and they leave, right? No pressure, and that's the whole thing. But the thing is, they take that message with them, and it kind of just sits inside them. And the next week, maybe they'll come in, maybe hang out a little bit longer, maybe have 2 cups of coffee, maybe 2 or 3 cookies, and while they're doing that, they listen a little bit more. Then after they think about it more, and maybe the next week, they'll come and sit down and join the circle. And then that's where the healing starts, right? Is that long process of being patient. And if we give them the power to make changes for themselves, then they will want to make changes. Hate to say it, but you know that old joke, right? How many counselors does it take to change a light bulb? Oh. You know out there, Wetland?
Anybody?
Only one, but first the light bulb has to be willing to change first. All right? Absolutely. So, any questions so far?
Any questions? Any comments?
Oh, come on, I need a comment for that amazing joke.
We have people laughing.
All right.
And
What
that's
what
great,
are
that's
some
great.
cultural approaches to support the mitigation of co-occurring disorders?
Oh my God, that is like about half of my PowerPoint coming up.
Good.
So I'm hoping though that time won't just me talking about my PowerPoint, because what I'm hoping here, and what Sean is hoping, is that we can have a dialogue, and hopefully you can help me make my presentation a little bit better too. Some amazing stuff. I hope I get a printout of some of these great replies, and yeah.
Yes, we can forward that on to you, definitely.
Yeah. Now here was a nice little thing that I just loved, saying this professor is just has an amazing look. Now of course this is a little bit dark because we're talking about social determinants of health, and we're talking about root causes, foster care, prison systems. It's so easy, right, Chana? Because right now we have this whole truth and reconciliation, and we're acknowledging, the horrific things that happened in residential school. And it was, what happened should never have happened. And, my mothers, my grandparents, they all had to suffer through that. And we have this kind of perception now that, well, that happened then, right? Now it's the time for us to heal and get over it. But the thing is today, there are more children in care, in foster care, than there was at the height of the residential school system. So when we talk about cultural genocide, and we get people that are saying, well, hey, get over it. How can you get over something that's not even done yet? How can we get over something that is just as bad, if not worse, right? So we really have to look at these issues. Geez, that was a dark
We
joke.
do have some comments, and somebody's asking, as a non-Aboriginal person, how can they support us in this journey?
Oh, that is something that I love to hear all the time, because when we look at our most basic Aboriginal teachings, probably our most foundational teachings, which is augmented, changed, built upon, but it always goes down to the 4 sacred directions of the medicine wheel, right? And it also comes down to the metaphysical wheel, mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical. But it also comes down to the 4 races, right? The Aboriginal people cannot heal without the help of the black race, the yellow race, and the white race. We need our Caucasian brothers and sisters, we need our African Americans, we need our Asians to come together and all help us heal. And that is the whole thing. This walk cannot be done by just us. It has to be done with everyone. And it's not an inclusive thing. Aboriginal culture is not an inclusive thing. Our practices is shared openly, right? Now, I know there are West Coast traditions and songs, and I'm not talking about that. But what I am talking about is the concept of land stewardship, the concept of community, the concept of resiliency. That is a humanistic trait that is right here in our culture.
And someone else has brought up also to include the 60 Scoop children.
Oh, yes, exactly. And I do hope that whenever we look at the survivors of residential school and the children that are in foster care, that we forget about that huge group of many people that grew up not even knowing they were Aboriginal. And not only that, told that, no, we saved you.
Yeah.
Saved you? What are you talking about, right? Yes, exactly. That is the whole point. And how are we going to do it though, right? We can have some great conversations about let's get having paradigm shifts of thought where we can deconstruct everything. Let's just rip down our society. Our educational systems, right, which is a colonial view, right? Break down the 1%, right? I'm talking about you out there, Bill Gates. Hey, we got shut off. No, but realistically, it would be nice to change the universe. But what I would like to do is just change the individual first, right? Change ourselves, and if we start doing that in a microcosm, right, with you, me, us 4 people in this room, and then once we feel better, hopefully we can move on to Adams Lake, and to our other communities and just kind of ripple out. Now, didn't we have a question about what type of approaches to use?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, let's have a sip of tea and
So
think about it.
what is an Aboriginal holistic approach to co-occurring disorders?
Yes, here we go. This is why I'm in the seat. Very honored to be here. Okay, well, when I was in the co-occurring disorders program, they asked me to come up with a concept of dealing with co-occurring disorders. So of course I looked at my own culture first. Always write about things right? So I'm not saying that I'm some expert, right? But growing up, luckily with a mother that was very Aboriginally inclined and very close to her elders, I was able to learn a lot from my mother. Thanks, Mom. Right? But I was able to actually take a lot of the lessons that I learned from my family members, like Leo Badger and my mother, and also some great cultural presenters in the area, like Colin Bird. He's just absolutely amazing. The speeches that he does, the workshops he does with cultural sensitivity really brings to light our lessons of who we are, right? We're not these medicine men, shaman, wind and hair, out there chasing down a buffalo. It'd be cool. I tried that once. Damn, I'll never do mushrooms again. Don't do drugs. But we are people, and we do have that connection, that history. Now, we take this holistic approach, and what I did was I looked at the 6 child and youth perspectives, right? And I'd like to go through them, hopefully real quickly. The first one, being a relational perspective. Relational means that we have to look at the relationship with the child. We need to put the child first, right? And whenever we start dealing with somebody, we have to look at it like, okay, what are the needs of this person? What does this person need, right? We have to be attentive. So we look at this perspective, we add on a strength-based perspective. This one is really important, right? Because I'm sure you guys know that if there's a child out there that needs affection, needs somebody to build them up, the best thing to do is just to tell them that you are a good person. Don't let that forget. My mother, sometimes whenever I used to feel down, I would just call her answering machine. Hopefully she wouldn't answer, because she used to say, hi, darling Cardinal, I can't come to the phone, but please leave a message. And remember, you are good stuff, and don't let anyone else tell you any different, right? And that is a strength-based perspective, right? What my mother was saying is like, whoever you are special, right? An ecological perspective. Okay, is there any child and youth care workers out there?
Is there any? Here? Yes, I am.
Okay, all you CY seers,
Yeah.
tell me what the ecological perspective is. in one name. Starts with a B.
Brock.
There we go. Brock from
So
Brenner.
what does that mean to the rest of us?
Okay. We said we wouldn't use any jargon or nothing, but there was Yuri Brofenbrenner. He was this great person who brought out the ecological perspective, which basically talks about how our little circles, and you remember we were talking about this earlier, about how we have like a microcosm, right? You know, we have our very dearest people in our little circle. Let's call it a little circle of trust, right? And outside of that would be our second little circle, which would be community,
Keep going.
which would be community and, you know, like friends, peer groups. Outside of that would be like, you know, our bigger community, maybe police, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So it's like circle upon circle upon circle upon circle upon circle.
Yeah.
So next, you know, we have our whole universe caught within all these little circles.
Okay.
Now, I bet a lot of you people are going, hey, wait a minute, Ernie. That's not the ecological perspective, that's the sacred tree. And yes, it is. Brofenbrenner did actually admit that it is actually old medicine wheel teachings, right? But the nice thing though is Brofenbrenner was the one to actually bring it out in forefront. So we owe a lot of, mad respect to him, right? All right. The developmental perspective. Okay, now that we're talking about intelligent white guys with little bow ties, we're going to talk about another fellow, Erik Erikson. You know, a fellow who used to hang out with this Freud guy, right? You know, but his developmental perspective talked about stages of life, right? You know, the 8 stages of life, where it believes that you have to overcome a challenge or you must do something before you go to your next level, then to your next level, then to your next level. That's very important. And here's our 6th final child and youth perspective. This is the social justice perspective, right? And that, oh, wait a minute.
We're at 5.
We're at 5.
Yeah, I was
That's
like looking. Well,
way back. Okay, so. Okay, I was going to do like a background noise. We should get a sound effect in here for this. Okay, sorry. A pluralistic perspective. Now, I always like this one because for me, personally, this is one of my favorite ones because I can always relate to this. And I know there's probably a lot of people out there that are just like me. Now, the pluralistic means to not just have empathy, but you can actually see what they are seeing, right? You know, to actually hear their story, to actually get on their level and look at different ways of approaching a problem, right? You know, because let's face it, we go through habits, and especially in our field, right? Where we deal with so many, let's say, street youth. And unfortunately, I've met a couple of workers, God love them, they're still out there helping people. But I'll remember them saying to me, Ernie, man, I heard every story that there is out there. And once I hear that, I'm like, oh no. Because we can't just be glooping our street youth into one big story, right?
Yeah.
We can't be taking our mental health people and saying, this is who you are. We can't take our addicts and say, I've dealt with addicts, so this is how you are, right? We have to look at everyone and we have to hear their story, how they look at life, just the way you're looking at me, right?
So would that be going from strength-based, in other words, your gifts, instead of deficit, in other words, you are an addict, so you have all these.
That is great, yes.
This is you.
Yeah.
Or you have mental health issues, so this is you.
Exactly. Well, that kind of goes back to the number 2 strength-based perspective, where a long time ago, the medical field used to always say, okay, well, what's wrong with you? What can we fix, right? As opposed to the strength-based is, and this is what I love about the MCFD right now. I can't believe I actually said that. What I love about MCFD is quite a few years ago now, It feels like yesterday though, but a few years ago, they actually changed the way of writing their reports from being like, this is what you need to fix, to a strength-based approach. And if you ask me, I think that's the most amazing thing, where you can actually look at somebody and say, oh, okay, you're in severe poverty, you have 7 kids, your income is $650 a month, but yet you feed them, you find a way to get food for your kids every day, you find a way to get clothing for them, this and that. Now how they get the money, that's kind of on the down low, but the point is, they actually are able to survive.
Yeah.
Now that's strength-based, right?
Yeah.
They're able to find that resiliency, that way to move forward, right? Strength-based is amazing, and you're right, that goes hand in hand, and also a social justice perspective. Now the reason why I'm rushing through this one is because, well, for one, it's pretty self-explanatory, that's advocating, right? But I wanted to go back to what you were talking about, Shauna, which was, looking at the deficits, the way you look at the thing. The whole point of these perspectives is you can't just choose one. You can't get locked into just one perspective and stay there. To be effective, you have to use all of them, right? You have to, put your pluralistic with a strength-based perspective while you're looking at their ecological, situation. And that way you have more tools to use in your little tool belt, right? Just get in there, mix it up, right? And the whole bit. Now, this is your basic 6 child and youth perspectives, but when I was starting to do the co-occurring disorders, I realized that, there is a new 7th child and youth perspective coming out. It's starting to get acknowledged by a lot of universities, colleges, communities, child youth care workers are starting to bring in this 7th perspective. Anybody out there know what that 7th perspective is?
Anybody?
Anybody?
Okay.
We just have a sip of coffee while we, this is very
Wish
tasty.
there was a somatic perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love that.
That would be amazing.
No clue, laugh out loud. Aboriginal,
Maybe
Indigenous,
that's
belonging.
Who said that? Let's back up there. That's
Aboriginal is Jess.
Jess, you just got yourself a golden star from Ernie. Yes, thank you very much. The Aboriginal perspective. Now, a lot of people are starting to credit great authors like Michael Anthony Hart, who wrote a great book just a little bit ago. But of course, the Aboriginal perspective doesn't just start at him, this man that's current right now. The Aboriginal perspective, of course, started like over 15,000 years ago. But just like Rothenbrenner and Erickson, they learned our ways, but now we're starting to take ownership of that ourselves. And we're bringing up our own Aboriginal perspective. Now, let's take a look at these perspectives. Now we have relational, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now let's look at that in an Aboriginal way. Now what I like about that is really what we're looking at is respect. And when we look at respect, we have our 7 sacred teachings, right? We got wisdom, we have bravery, truth, honesty, humility, love, and respect. Now, those are our 10 poles. Without them, we as a people cannot grow. We cannot survive. We need those lessons. So when we look at relational, we have to start at respect, right? And that's the main component of relational is respect. So we look at that as kind of our starting ground of the 7 sacred teachings. Bring that back into our culture, into our community, right? And then we move up to strength-based. Well, after being pushed down for how many generations, right? After being told you're dirty, your culture, don't speak your language, right? Go away, die, all of this horrible stuff, and yet we still are resilient. We're still able to, kind of pop up. You know, so that just shows how strong we are as a people. So we have to really celebrate that, how strong we are as, and just acknowledge that. Then we look at our ecological. Bronfenbrenner, thank you very much. But when we look at the Aboriginal component, the ecological is our medicine wheel teachings. And we will definitely talk more about the medicine wheel teachings. And we look at developmental stages, right? Going through, we have to complete one before we go to our next. That's when we have to start bringing back our ceremonies. We have to bring back our traditions, our rites of passage, right? You know, I'll never forget being a young boy going to Ram River Falls, right? As a young boy with a bunch of other 14-year-old boys. And every day, one of us would be left behind, right? So we would have to go do an ice glacier bath, right? You know, we'd have to connect back with Mother Earth. You know, climb a mountain. We had to do all that stuff. And that was a bonding time and a time for me to go from youth to man. And without that, that wouldn't be who I am today. So we have to bring those ceremonies back in, and it's imperative in the Aboriginal approach that the developmental really kind of puts that as a forefront, and pluralistic. Now you're thinking, well, what is perceptions, different perceptions, but what it comes down to is we're looking at storytelling, and when it comes to storytelling, that is a whole section of Aboriginal culture. Storytelling isn't just telling stories, it's a way of healing. It's a way of learning our traditions, our cultures, so that we know how to do our ceremonies, right? It's all connected. So our pluralistic way of looking at life really is bringing back the stories in our life. And of course, social justice. We need to keep on making our rallies. We still need to, not be idle. Yeah, right? We gotta bang our drums. We gotta annoy people. We have to, be on the news, right? Push the Canucks back and, talk about us, and we have to do that, as a people. Once again, it's a form of healing, right? So you take all of these 6 perceptions, you balance them together, you bring them together into an Aboriginal perspective, and that is going to help us towards our next point. Now, was I talking for a long time? Holy smokes. Why don't we take a break for a second or two, see if there's any questions?
Is there any questions or comments from webinar or?
Please, give me a comment.
I just wanted to comment over here, it's Leah. I love how you pulled all of that together into that model, and I'm sure some of us wishes that we actually would have caught some of those suggestions in each one of those.
Oh yes, sorry about that, folks.
So we had to just be really good listeners, and I wasn't able to copy it all down.
Now the good thing is, this will be on YouTube.
Yes.
Yes, and I have no problems with you guys copying any of my stuff. So I do hope that you do check it out on YouTube, so that you can look at the child and youth care perspectives compared to the Aboriginal perspective.
And we'll be able to, if it's all right with you, turn this into a PDF and put it on your webpage after. Is that okay?
Yes. Oh, I would love that. That would be great.
So you'll have access to the PowerPoint after also.
Yeah, and if at the end someone's asking if you could just review that model one more time at the end, that would be really good, if there's time, of course.
Absolutely.
Although, are we finishing at 11:15 or?
Yeah, we'll start roughly, yeah.
It's 11 o'clock and it's a beautiful day here in UBC. The sun is shining, it's not raining. I was hoping somebody from Alberta would have logged on.
No, somebody did say you can't push back the Canucks. They have their boundaries.
Awesome. So, we were talking at lengths about the perspectives, but I also when I was doing a lot of research, I read this little green book called Reclaiming Youth at Risk. And it's kind of almost the Bible for working with street youth if you're an Aboriginal person. And it was written by this local man, Reverend Dr. Martin Brokenleg. Raise my hands up to you. Every time I get a chance, I always got to meet this guy. I learned so much, and I really highly recommend, if you ever do get a chance, please do see him speak. Now, quite a while ago, he got together with these two gentlemen, Larry and Martin and Steve, and they wrote this book. Now, what they did was they looked at Dr. Martin Brokenleg and his childhood teachings of the medicine wheel from his Sioux Lakota heritage. And he brought up the traditional beliefs, the medicine wheel beliefs. Now, and he called it the Circle of Courage. There are 4 components of the Circle of Courage that will build resiliency in a child, right? And that is a sense of belonging. We're starting out at the east, when the sun rises and it's the start of a beautiful day. The very first step of towards healing is to build a sense of belonging. And the second would be mastery, independence, and finally generosity. And then that's back to our full circle. Now, you're probably thinking, hey, this isn't a youth conference. This is a co-occurring disorders, right? Well, one thing I realized that while I was going to the child and youth programming, and at the same time attending my co-occurring disorders program, I was noticing that the statistics, the results, and the symptoms of a youth at risk and somebody suffering a co-occurring disorder were identical. They actually were exactly the same. So I started looking at treatment types, and I realized, hey, it's exactly the same thing. You can't treat a youth just try to fix them with one thing and then move on to the next thing. They fall through the cracks. You can't do parallel, because whenever you work with the youth, if you don't have a wraparound effect with our youth, bring them in together so they feel that they're part of community, then they just, deflate or implode. So the best way to work with a youth at risk is to do an integrated model, just like co-occurring disorders. So when I looked at the co-occurring disorder model and the youth resiliency model, I realized that the first thing we got to do you remember we talked about patience?
Yes.
And how we were talking about how, you open up a door, you have a group, and you just let them contemplate. Can I go in this place? Should I go there? Have a coffee, listen to them talk for a bit. They leave whenever they want. But the point is, though, is there's an open door. They have a chance to walk in. They have a feeling that, they won't get kicked out. They won't get a feeling that they got to pay something, but they feel like they belong. And then once they join that group, a bigger sense of belonging comes in. A sense of universality will come in, where sharing your story will suddenly become important. And then once you share a story, then you feel that you're going to be connected to all the people in that circle. That's a part of the sacred circles, right? That's why they're so effective. And because not only do you give something of yourself, but as a listener, you have to listen and take that in. So once that becomes in, that connection gets made, a sense of belonging is made. We then move down the list to mastery. Belonging is basically the time of giving the person a breath of fresh air, or just a breath, right? And they're starting to feel that, they can get themselves grounded a bit, they feel a little bit better, and then they can start working on, finding a proper treatment, right? And that's where the mastery comes in. That's where we let them choose, and that's the important thing, right? Once again, as much as I would just want to hug, somebody that's close to me that has co-occurring disorders and force them into treatment, we can't do that. right? We got to let them do that. That comes through mastery. You know, they're taking the world and just grabbing it, you know, opportunities, and they're making it their own. And once they feel strong enough, then we go on to independence, and that's a great one. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, and we'll go right up into independence, right? Now, a lot of people look at independence as, oh, well, that just means that just means you can live by yourself, pay your bills, wash your clothes, put your dishes in the dishwasher. But it's kind of more, right? It's a sense of your own proof of worthiness, and that's really where independence comes. You know, it's a strength-based thing. You know, am I worthy? You know, because once you start saying that, and you start loving yourself. Once you start loving yourself, what happens? You start to want to give back, right? You want to, you know, start loving other people, other things. You start feeling good about yourself. Now, I'm going to steal this from Martin Broken Lake, because, you know, but I always loved how he goes, you know, have you ever been to a party with a Secret Santa and somebody gives you a gift, you open it up, and it's a big green Rudolph red-nosed tie that lights up red, right? You go, ha, 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 nice. You bring it home, you throw it in the closet. You know, 12 months go by and it's your turn to give a, you know. That's not generosity. That's just regifting. Thank you, Martin. But generosity, real generosity, you know, that's really coming from here, right? And I loved how he also talked about in his Sioux traditions how real generosity means to just give something really important away, right? And the old Sioux traditions say you should be able to give your most prized possession away without your heart skipping a beat, right? And he talked about that, and about 6 months after I last saw him, I kind of followed what he did. This is my second bear claw necklace. I got this from a great friend of mine from Kennedy House after my practicum, my 4th year practicum, and I made this into a necklace, but I used to have another necklace, and it had a bear claw on it too. And somebody kept complimenting me on it, and although it was very important to me, and a very important elder gave it to me, there was a whole story. It had like little beautiful colored beads on it and a whole bit. And I just remember what he talked about, real generosity, giving away something that's important to you without your heart skipping a beat. So I just took it off and I gave it to the person. I said, here, enjoy it, right? Have it, right? And well, truth be told, a couple months later, I'm like, damn, where is it? But it all balances out, because just like our medicine wheel, you know, now I got to do one, right? Now, I'm not talking about karma or something. I do believe in karma. But the point that I'm trying to say is give it a try, right? Be generous, really generous. And you'll find that your heart will grow, just like the Grinch. Right? Boom, boom, boom. Right? Yeah. All right. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about with the co-occurring disorders Aboriginal approach is how we take the Aboriginal perspectives that we talked about, the 6 perspectives, and the circle of courage, and we put them together so that we could start dealing with our community members. And the very first thing we need to do with them is build that sense of belonging so that they can gain and maintain stability. Once they get that, they can move up into improving their quality of life. That's mastering independence. And then finally, the sense of generosity. And that's where they regain functioning. That's when they start to feel good about themselves. And now I would have put that in a medicine wheel, but I thought, you know, for some maybe there's an Egyptian person out there that is, you know. All right, so there's only a few minutes left, so I just want to put a couple stats, because what's a webinar without stats, right? Only 7.4% of individuals receive treatment for both conditions, with 55.8% receiving no treatment at all. See, that's the reason why we got to follow Alberta. Just yesterday, they have opened up a lot of co-occurring disorders specific beds. So these are going to be beds specifically for co-occurring disorder people, right? So we got to pick that up too. We can't just start doing sequential treatment. We can't just have treatment beds anymore. We can't have just mental health issues anymore. We got to have both, right?
And with an Aboriginal perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that be great? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I guess my question about that is it always beds that people need? Like, like there's a spectrum, so does beds mean, what does that actually mean? What do you mean by beds?
Well, we're talking funding dollars. That's really what it comes down to, right? Now, when I say beds, I'm reading off of what CBC put on the web, the internet just yesterday, talking about money that they have earmarked specifically for co-occurring disorders. But myself, where I would like to see treatment dollars go to would be in group therapy, right? And that group therapy wouldn't be like, groups where people have to commit. I'm talking about groups where, once again, they can come in, have a cup of coffee, eat a cookie, just listen a little bit, contemplate, if they even want to go to that next step, right? There should be 4 different levels of groups out there, ranging from just dropping in to involvement, to heavy involvement, to actual treatment, and being in a situation where there is a bed available, right? So we just can't hit just beds. We do have to go all the way into our community, once again, to build that sense of belonging. So you're right, we do have to have an Aboriginal look at this to be effective, right? We have to be able to go to the street, go right into the home community so that we all understand that it's all of us, right? We're all affected. Absolutely. I see our time is almost up. Can I ask just one last question from my mentor?
Yes.
Bob always asks me this. The more numerous the barriers, the more difficult the task. Or, the more numerous the barriers, the more opportunities of success. Right? Now, I always liked how he said that. Him and John Fox used to always talk about the concept of being a ship lost in sea on a super stormy day. And this ship is getting battered. It's getting whacked left and right? Now, if you're that ship lost out in the water, just like a lot of co-occurring disorder people feel, just lost, right? Not connected. Now, if there's only one port available, and that's way the heck down at the other end of the sea, the chances of surviving is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
But if we look at different opportunities and different treatment types, we start opening up other ports left and right. So we have to make every port available, right? So that these people have an opportunity to pull into the closest port, to get off of those stormy seas, pull in and start getting treatment, start getting support, help as soon as possible. So when we talk about the more numerous the barriers, more opportunities for success, I always like that, because if there's a barrier, then there's an opportunity, so we can help that person and then get in there to help all the other barriers. Right? It's the first step in.
So what can communities do? What can they do to start? Beginning stages.
Well, the first thing I would do is have some facilitators come in to maybe start looking at starting those pre-contemplative groups that I was talking about, right? Start having those youth groups, right? It literally hurts when I hear that there are cuts to youth groups. It just boggles me that there's so many great programs that are only offered funding for 2 years. 2 years and then gone. Once these youth start feeling that they're feeling connected to not just a youth worker, but to the other people in the community, they start giving back to the community, and then they find out that the youth center is closed down because there's no more funding. We need continuous funding so that these groups are there for the community. Without belonging, there is no foundation. And without the foundation, we can't work to higher functioning, and we can't work towards, full balanced mental health. So I would say belonging is definitely our first step.
So belonging, that can happen through ceremony too?
Absolutely, yes, exactly, because you'll find that once you start getting community centers as a hub, the very center of, our community, then you'll find the number of cultural nights start popping up, powwow night, language nights. Some great, amazing things start popping up.
So that can create a sense of belonging and bring them in for the
Yes.
first few steps.
Exactly. Well, what brings them in actually, Shauna, is stale donuts and watery coffee, right? That is what it is. You got to break that bread. You got to kind of entice them in, right?
Yeah.
But once they're in, then it's our job to, start looking at these people and say, hey, you're good enough.
Yeah.
You're smart enough. Just come on in, right?
Building the relationships,
Yeah.
seeing you as a human being with strengths.
And you always got to hear their story, because we haven't heard all the stories out there. Your stories are unique. Your stories are you. I want to hear them. Yeah.
So there's a lot of comments.
Oh,
Cool.
there's amazing
And,
amount of comments.
Yeah, I go, where do I start?
Yeah. I guess the biggest thing that I'm hearing from some of these comments is the role of being an advocate, because there's not enough dollars. So there's that, just the screaming about, or the need for that. And the other is that sometimes with these groups, the bar is too high, keeping people sober, right? Some of these
Yes,
comments.
that is a really, really, really big thing, and that is one thing that we have to learn about patience. And I know that's a hard thing, because a lot of Aboriginal communities are very, 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 very sticklers with no alcohol, no drugs. And yes, when you're talking about ceremony, I 100% agree with you. However, we have to look at co-occurring disorders model a little bit differently. Like, maybe we can't take them to sweat lodges, right? But maybe we can at least start them with, doing a sacred circle, right? And because when you're dealing with co-occurring disorders, they are actively using. So once again, with the sequential, we can't say to them, well, we'll offer you help, but you got to go clean. We have to really embrace the harm reduction. We have to deal with them sometimes as saying, okay, you're doing heroin. Well, okay, can you, you can still do your heroin, but, maybe you can start monitoring how much you use, how often you're using, find a baseline. So you're actually saying, I'm accepting you for who you are, right? And by accepting that person, we're giving some validity that they are human beings still. They're not just some junkie, right? They are my sister, they are my brother, they are my mother, right? So the whole point is to give them that sense of belonging and to hear their story. Once again, I know I'm repeating myself, but the important thing is we can't say no to them at the beginning. We have to let them come in. We have to let them have the choice to want to change. And they won't change if the door's locked, right? If we put barriers in front of them, they are not going to want to change, right? We all need help, right? We all need a little sympathy. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Adams Lake, anything that you would like to share or comment about? And click the mic if you'd like to share anything. Okay.
Once again, thank you so much for listening. Means a lot.
And there's so many comments. I'll just quickly read through what I can see right now. There's some barriers with harm reduction
Yes.
from a government perspective, but I personally have been down and seen what they're doing with harm reduction on the east side, and they're doing good work there.
Yes, they are. It's absolutely. You look at what the work of Dr. Gabriel Mate, he is a perfect example when he looks at addictions not as something bad, but as, you know, something that, you know, they're doing to self-medicate. You know, we gotta find out what's hurting you. Why are you self-medicating? What is hurting you? And if we start looking at that perspective, as opposed to you're bad, you know, stop doing this, as opposed to why are you hurting yourself? Or, you know, what is hurting yourself? You know, that's a great way to look at it.
And somebody said, I've learned this way with my instructors that they have clients and they ask them not to use the day of the ceremony if they want to attend.
And people are wanting some hope around the criminal justice system for young adults because we're criminalizing them early, and so that creates a cycle as well that becomes hardened over time.
It really makes you wonder because, you know, our new government, you know, I voted NDP, you know, don't hate me, but when the Liberals came in, I was like, but, you know, after what Justin Trudeau said he would do, it kind of like, I thought, hey, maybe this isn't too bad. You know, maybe there is some hope, right? And who knows, you know, he's still trying, and, you know, there's a lot of things happening, but the whole legalization of marijuana, it could be a first step towards something bigger, but of course I heard that it's getting, it's not going to go as fast as we thought, and there's some new federal changes, but you are right, decriminalization of the, you know, the drug world, and make it into more of a medical issue would really change the way we deal with the addicts, right? There is no doubt about that. Thank you for that.
And there's some comments too, just about how sometimes it seems like workers become burnt out, and so it's more like,
Well,
what did you do instead of what happened to you?
Yeah.
Not realizing, I guess, I'm assuming getting burnt out, but yeah, somebody who's self-medicating is actually just trying to survive the trauma that's on
yeah,
there.
well, see, that's the thing too. You got to remember that when we're looking as service providers out in the field, it's not just burnout; it's vicarious trauma, right? And when we're looking at lateral violence, I should say, as well, because we, as much as we have our self-care plans put in front of us like that big old armor, we are human people, and we are going to feel, you know, what is happening around us. So when we're working with these vulnerable people, we hope for them. Let's face it, we love these people. And what's going to happen is some of that violence, some of that intergenerational trauma that they went through, their story that they're sharing with you, you got to take some of that on. And that's the whole part of being a circle, is sharing. You know, and that can be it can weigh you down. But once again, you know, you have to look at our ceremonies, keep it in balance, right? Make sure you're smudging. Make sure you're connecting with the nature. Make sure you've got that special person to talk to. You know, luckily I'm blessed. I have a lot of good friends that whenever I feel down, I have their ear. And in a good way, in a good cultural way. Colin Bird, I'm talking about you, buddy. Right?
That's awesome. We could keep answering questions for quite some time. It's a big topic, important topic. Maybe we can have you back in the future, and
I would love to come back.
because there's so much to talk about. It's so in depth, and we've just touched the surface on this. And unfortunately, we have to start wrapping up right now.
I gotta go fight traffic for 2 hours.
I really want to thank everybody at Adams Lake and Webinar Land for joining us today, and a big thank you behind the scenes to Davina and Leah for all their help and support. And I'm so grateful, Ernie, that you came to spend this time with us. Ernie and I used to work together, and a frontline worker that I know, Leslie Picton, was saying, I would really like to have this topic, and I was like, Ernie, and so I'm grateful
right
you
on,
came
Leslie.
today. And we
Good
have
friend,
some
too.
sessions coming up that I quickly want to tell you about, and you can see that they've been put up on webinar, but you can't see them video conference. Tomorrow we have BC Early Years Center Network with, and that will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. and that's about a webinar and a pilot program. And then we have the Dudes Club coming up, and that will be March 2nd at 10:30 a.m. And that's a Brotherhood for Men's Health with Vancouver Native Health Society. We have Mark Point, and he's going to be talking about what does Aboriginal student success look like, and he's going to look at the layers, including what can community do. And that's March 8th. And then community conversations on HIV/AIDS in First Nations communities. That's March 9th at 10:30. But have a look at our website and have a look, if you're on webinar, you can see there. And thank you so much for joining us. And Ernie.
Ninashkuman.